Hi, I'm Mike MacArthur.
And I'm Justine Elliott. We're librarians here at the Oshkosh Public Library.
And this is the Great Reads of 2020.
We're going to tell you about a few of the best books that we read that were published in 2020. You can find a list of all of our recommendations for the books that were published in 2020 in a link below. But in this video, we'll just tell you about some of our favorites.
Yep. So let's get started.
Dear Edward by Ann Napolitano was a great book that I read. It's about a 12-year-old boy whose family is moving from the East Coast to LA, and the plane crashes. He loses his entire family, his parents, and his older brother, who he's really close with. He's the only survivor of the plane crash. He's adopted by his aunt and uncle. He is swarmed by social media fame. He has to kind of learn how to move on, process the grief, and rebuild. It's a crazy, intense story. It's really interesting. The narrative goes between Edward moving on after the crash and then also during the flight. So you learn about the other characters that were on the plane. Really interesting, really intense. It's actually inspired by a true story. There was a plane that crashed in 2010. It was going from South Africa to the UK, and it crashed in Libya. And there was one survivor, and it was a young boy. So it's inspired by that true story. Really fascinating, intense story about moving on, a true coming-of-age novel. Really recommend it.
Such a Fun Age by Kylie Reed. This is really a comedy of best intentions, focuses on a 25-year-old black girl named Amira who lives in Philadelphia and is working as a babysitter for a well-off white family. One night, Amira gets pulled out of a friend's birthday party to babysit randomly in the middle of the night and decides to kill some time with the little girl she's watching in the local grocery store, where the security there thinks that she has kidnapped this small girl. So she's detained. She has to call the husband the father to come in and explain everything. And all of this gets recorded on a cell phone video that eventually gets released out into the internet and kind of turns her life upside down. Her trying to deal with this incident of racial profiling, this awkward time of her life, and dealing with the best of intentions of her employers who want to be seen as very woke and very understanding and supportive of her, but they don't always listen to what she really needs. Amira is a great central and empathetic protagonist, and I have to say the whole thing wraps up at the end so beautifully. Such a Fun Age by Kylie Reed.
A Burning by Megha Majumdar was fantastic. This is a debut novel. It's set in India. There are three main characters. The chapters rotate perspective from those three characters. So we've got Jivan, who's a young Muslim girl who is working on her education. She's the first in her family to be educated, so she's trying to better herself and her family through education. Then we have Lovely. Lovely is a trans woman who is seeking to have a successful acting career, so is trying to make connections in the acting world and striving to be successful that way. The third character is PT Sir, who's a gym teacher at a girls' school and kind of becomes involved in this political party. Starts as kind of a runner and then is recognized for his work and dedication and kind of climbs the ranks in this political party. So the three characters are actually connected by this event that happens where there's an attack on a train that kills over 100 people. Jivan, the young Muslim girl, makes a post on social media that is critical of the police's reaction and their efforts to help during that event, and then she becomes the number one suspect. So what ends up happening is that Lovely is her alibi, So they're all kind of interwoven by that one incident. Really interesting story. Again, set in India. It was fascinating for me. It reminded me of when I studied abroad in India, and I loved it. Really intense, but all focused on those three people who wanted to be successful, and really fascinating. These Ghosts Are Family by Maisie Card begins with Stanford Solomon, who isn't actually Stanford Solomon. He stole his friend's identity 30 years ago, so he's actually Abel Paisley, and this is a story about the Paisley family. It spans generations. Each chapter focuses on a different member of the family, and it goes from colonial Jamaica all the way to Harlem. It's a story about identity, family, migration, and slavery, history, personal dramas, everything you could want. It was really fascinating, and I really recommend it.
A Madness of Sunshine by Nalini Singh. This is a procedural murder mystery set in a small town in New Zealand. The main protagonist, Anahara Spencer Ashby, recently was widowed, had been living in London, and after the death of her husband, she returns to her hometown of Golden Cove on the coast of New Zealand. Here, she returns back into just a town that is haunted by ghosts, and not literal ghosts, but ghosts of past relationships and events that are mired in mystery. When she gets back, she meets the new local sheriff, who is an outsider named Will Garrison, who has some checkered past of his own, and there's a reason why he is now the one sheriff out in the middle of nowhere. Shortly after she returns, a beautiful young girl goes missing, and it is eerily reminiscent of several disappearances from Anahara's past. It's a beautiful, haunting procedural mystery. Nalini Singh normally writes in the kind of supernatural paranormal romance genre, and it really shows. She can create an amazing atmosphere. This is definitely not the New Zealand of the Lord of the Rings. This is a beautiful yet threatening environment where you're in this town where everybody knows each other and everybody's hiding secrets. So if you're looking for a great procedural mystery in the vein of a Tana French, A Madness of Sunshine by Nalini Singh. 21 Truths About Love by Matthew Dix is a very witty and heartfelt tale of what it means to be a man and to provide and dealing with one's own insecurities. It concerns a gentleman named by the name of Dan, who quit his job as a teacher and opened a bookstore. Soon this bookstore is failing miserably, but he has not told his recently pregnant wife just how bad things are getting. So it's all about his kind of inner neurosis as he tries to, one, figure a way of fixing everything by himself without telling his wife. Two, him coming to terms with being a father, which he isn't totally ready for. And three, the fact that he's his business is failing and he is not really doing a great job of being this manager of this bookstore. The whole thing's written as basically journal entries that are written in list form. So goes chronological order where, he'll list off every month, this is how much money the store is making. This is how much I tell my wife the store is making. This is how much it's in our bank account. And you just see the numbers, go down and down. It's really in line with books like The Storied Life of A.J. Fikry, which I also love. And just very funny and charming. If you can hang in there with the kind of unusual format and you like this kind of character, man, 21 Truths About Love is a great, fun, kind of positive read.
The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett is getting rave reviews this year. It's really fascinating. It's about twins who are born in a small black community in Louisiana. They look exactly the same. They get fed up with their small town and they decide to run away. So when they're 16, they run away to New Orleans. And they get jobs in New Orleans and they kind of dream about where their lives could go. one of them realizes during a job interview that she can pass for white. And so she decides that she wants to pursue that life. She leaves town. She eventually marries her boss. So she's married to a white guy, and she eventually settles down in California. The other sister, that's Desiree. So Stella is the one who moves on. Desiree leaves town to Boston, but then eventually comes back. She's got a daughter, and she raises her daughter in the town where she grew up. So the sisters are always kind of thinking about each other because they're twins. They have a really strong connection. But they lead completely different lives, and many, many years later, their daughters find each other, and it's a huge exploration of family and identity. It was really fascinating. It's a New York Times bestseller. It was a page-turner. I really recommend it. So check out The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett. Migrations by Charlotte McConaughey was amazing. This one is my favorite. It's about Franny Stone. First of all, it's set in the not-so-distant future where most animals are extinct. Franny Stone is a scientist who is in love with Arctic terns. Those are birds that migrate. They have the longest migration of any animal. They migrate from the Arctic Circle in Greenland all the way down to Antarctica and back. So she decides that she wants to track the Arctic terns on what is presumed to be their final migration before they're all extinct. The way that she can do this is by talking a captain of a fishing ship into following the terns with the presumption that that will lead to fish. So somehow she talks the captain of a fishing ship into following some terns that she has tagged. And they go on this journey on a fishing ship. And we kind of discover that Franny's not exactly who she says she is. And also, where's her husband? It was fascinating. It was beautiful. Really great character development. And yeah, I really recommend it. It was fascinating. It was awesome. Read it.
More Better Deals by Joe Lansdale is a hard-boiled crime thriller set in 1960s Texas. It follows Ed Edwards as a used car salesman who's chasing that American dream, but really not getting anywhere. Things start to change here when he goes to repossess a car and he meets Nancy, this kind of very femme fatale individual who convinces him to help her murder her husband, who's this abusive drunk. They want to kill him and then take over his business. He owns a drive-in movie theater and a pet cemetery. This is not really a whodunit. You see all that coming. It's about who's double-crossing who. In this kind of story, you have a bunch of unscrupulous, characters where everybody's trying to get the drop on everybody else, and everybody's working an angle. And there's a real grittiness and straightforwardness to these characters. And it's kind of a book about not great people doing not great things. You do root for him and you feel sympathetic to why he makes the choices he makes. I'd really recommend this to anybody who likes the crime novels of Joe Nesbo. There's a grittiness to this. And really, if you've read anything from the hard case crime imprint, you're really going to love this one by Joe Lansdale. All the Ways We Said Goodbye by Beatrice Williams, Lauren Willig, and Karen White. This is a historic fiction novel that is set in 3 different time periods, the 1960s, World War I, and World War II. And it follows 3 stories of 3 women in these different time periods. All 3 stories center around women and their connection to the Ritz Hotel in Paris, which I always think is really cool when they take a place and they break off and tell different stories all within the same place at a different time. So it starts in 1964 with Babs, who's staying at the Ritz, investigating basically the life of her late husband during World War II. Then it cuts back to World War I, and we follow the young daughter of a woman who owns a salon inside the Ritz. Her name is Aurelia. I'm probably mispronouncing that. Wants to see the action. This is right in the middle of World War I. so she escapes to her father's land thinking she can escape, maybe have an adventure, and she finds something very different when the German army forces the estate to house some soldiers, where she starts a love affair with a German soldier. We cut to World War II. We are now in German-occupied Paris, back at the Ritz, and we have Aurelia's daughter, who is living and working with her grandmother in the Ritz and working for the Parisian resistance fighters. What's amazing about this is you have really this immersive, suspenseful historical fiction novel that jumps around in time to the stories of these three women, and it's really interesting to see how they fade in and out of each other. All three authors, I'm not quite sure if each one picked a specific chapter to write or a specific character, but they all blend together wonderfully, and it's amazing to see how these stories mirror and reflect each other and the experiences that they all feel at these different points in history and how they're all connected. If you're a fan of kind of World War II or historical fiction, this is a definite read.
Vesper Flights by Helen Macdonald was great. This is a nonfiction, so this is a collection of short essays, and Helen Macdonald is a really fantastic nature author. So she wrote one of my favorites, H is for Hawk, which is a memoir. This is just as beautiful. It's her exploring the world around her and, like I said, focused on nature, but also humans' involvement in nature. So super beautifully written. Really recommend it. Once More to the Rodeo by Calvin Hennick is a memoir, and it is about a young father who's got a 5-year-old son who is half black. And the whole story only spans 5 days, but it's an exploration of what it means to be a man in this world, what it means to be a young black man, how a white father can teach his black son how to be safe in the world and thrive. So in the story, Calvin and his son are going on a road trip, but it was really beautifully written. They drive from the East Coast all the way to Calvin's hometown in Iowa, where they attend the annual rodeo. And it was always a really big event in Calvin's life growing up. So he kind of explores what it means for his son. Really, really nice book. I would recommend it if you want to read a memoir.
The Exiles by Christina Baker Klein. This is another kind of epic, emotional tour de force historical fiction tale, this time centered in the early development of Australia. It follows, again, 3 women. We first start out with a young Aborigine girl named Mathena, who's collected by a white, wealthy British family, basically because she could speak English. The book then cuts back to England, where we meet Evangeline, who is acting as a governess for a wealthy household. She has an affair with the son and becomes pregnant, which is unacceptable, so she's framed for stealing something and sent to prison, and then is basically sent to the colonies. On the ship ride over, she meets Hazel, who uses her knowledge of medicine to be a great asset on the boat. When they get off the boat, that's where they meet Mathena. Basically, through the eyes of these 3 women, you see the development, the early stages of building the nation of Australia. And it is powerful, it's violent, it's scary. There's moments of beauty, there's moments of love and compassion, fear. Definitely another winner for Christina Baker Klein. Deacon King Kong by James McBride. This is a novel set in 1969 Brooklyn and follows a huge cast of characters that all surround this, live in this one neighborhood. So one day, Deacon King Kong, Deacon Cuffy Lambkin, but he's known as Sport Coat, but also known as Deacon King Kong, King Kong being the name of a popular moonshine that's produced there that he imbibes a little too much of. So one day, he walks out and in broad daylight pulls a gun and shoots the ear off a local drug dealer. And so from that point, the novel jumps out to basically follow the lives of all the characters that were present at the moment. And it's really about, it uses this one incident of violence to jump in and explore the lives of this entire community. James McBride, probably best known right now for The Good Lord Bird. He has such a way of creating these different voices for each of these characters. It's kind of darkly humorous. Sport Coat, in particular, is a very kind of tragically funny character. If you're someone who likes big narratives and small dramas that feel no less weighty than the big dramas, Deacon King Kong by James McBride is definitely one you should check out.
The Beauty in Breaking is a memoir by Michelle Harper, and it's about an ER physician who moves to Pennsylvania with her first job in an ER, and right before the move, her husband tells her that he's leaving. So she goes into this brand new world, working as an ER doctor, also trying to find herself and discover what she wants out of life and reevaluate the path that she's on. So you meet a lot of different patients that come into the ER. You see a lot of different really crazy situations that an ER doctor might encounter. But it's really a book about trying to find your life's passion. It's really a beautiful memoir.
The Splendid and the Vile, a saga of Churchill, family, and defiance during the Blitz. Written by Eric Larson, this story follows Churchill during his first years as Prime Minister, which of course coincided with pretty much the darkest time in English history during World War II. So lots has been written about Churchill, volumes upon volumes. Lots have been written about World War II and the Blitz in particular. Larson takes an interesting approach to this. He says in the acknowledgments in the back that his approach to this was kind of as a parent. So he focuses a lot on Churchill's family. Here he looks at small incidents and details that have been left out of other biographies and reaccountings. So you read a lot about his daughters, how he was, coping with having teenage daughters during the Blitz. His daughter Mary, who really had a strong urge to be in London. She was shuffled off, as many were, out to more of the countryside to be away from danger. But she wanted to be there, had a whole lot of guilt about not being there. It was interesting. She also had a lot of guilt about actually having a pretty good time. She was, again, a young, pretty attractive girl and was, hanging out with pilots and going to dances and parties. It's these kind of moments that Larson really focuses in on. So even if you've read a lot about this is a unique take where I think you'll find a couple of new bits of history that haven't really been focused on in the past.
The Death of Vivek Ogee by Ekweke Emeze was a fantastic book set in Nigeria. So as you can guess from the title, it centers around the death of a character named Vivek Ogee. The very first chapter opens with Vivek Ogee's parents coming home to his body on the front steps. So he's gonna die. The rest of the book, it kind of backtracks after that, and then you eventually learn what happens to Vivek Ogee. You read it differently when you know what's going to happen in the end, but it was really fascinating. So like I said, set in Nigeria, the mothers have this community called the Niger Wives, where they're immigrants. So Vivek Ogee's mother is from India, and the Niger Wives have a really tight-knit community, and all the kids from those relationships grow up together. So we kind of see Vivek from these different lenses of characters, and we also the narrative switches from Vivek to his cousin Osita. This is a coming-of-age story, but like I said, you read it differently knowing from the title and from the first chapter that Vivek is gonna die. Really interesting and fabulously written. Highly recommend.
The Office, the untold story of the greatest sitcom of the 2000s. So this is basically an in-depth oral history of the entire run of The Office, the American Office TV show. It includes interviews with pretty much every character, showrunner, writer. Starts from the very beginning of the British sitcom to the pilot to Steve Carell becoming a movie star and the show taking off. If you're a fan, if you're a fan of The Office, this is a must-read.
Monogamy by Sue Miller is a story about Annie and Graham. They have a successful marriage. They're married for 30 years, and Graham dies suddenly. They're a really happy couple. Graham owns a bookstore. Annie's a photographer. After Graham's death, Annie discovers that Graham had a recent affair. So Annie kind of reevaluates everything in their relationship and just kind of, as you would, spiral out of control. Really intense character study, really beautifully written, set in Cambridge, Massachusetts. The bookstore vibe is really beautiful, and the bookstore is kind of like what tethers everything together. It's where they meet at first, and then it's a really important aspect of their relationship. It was really fascinating. It's getting a lot of good buzz too, so I would highly recommend Monogamy by Sue Miller.
Devolution by Max Brooks. This is probably my favorite book that I've read this year, and it concerns Bigfoot, a small kind of hippie Burning Man-esque community that is formed out in the woods in Washington who are roughing it with all the latest technologies. There's a natural catastrophe, and Mount Rainier erupts, causing chaos and panic and cutting them off from civilization and all of their technology. What also happens is this eruption pushes and you're going to have to stay with me here, a clan of Bigfoots out of the woods and directly into the path of these kind of city slickers trying to rough it. And what you get is kind of a survivalist novel. It's a bit of a monster novel. Max Brooks, again, wrote World War Z and is really well known for doing a lot of research that makes these kind of what on its face is a ridiculous situation, Bigfoot massacre, feel very real and very possible. If you're a fan of like Michael Crichton's old writing, Jurassic Park, Congo, this is a novel right up your alley. Hi, this is Mike MacArthur from the Asha.
Blah! And then he testified against her.
Don't give away the ending. A Madness of Sunshine. A Madness of...
I only did one take of all of them. Should I do another take?
All right. There's a moment there where I thought I hadn't recorded.
Read it! Please.
Read it. It's good.
Did you hear my phone buzzing?
I did not. Damn. I need to start over from the beginning from this. All right.
And end.